to our third and fourth episode of To Vaccinate or Not to Vaccinate. And we're really excited about having you all here. Wanted to, first of all, let you know that Pastor Anthony McDaniel, as you know, our pastor here, Pastor Nick Champlin of Faith Christian Church, and of course we'll introduce Dr. Bonilla in just a second. But we, and myself, Daniel Bernard, President of Somebody Cares, Tampa Bay, we have made up what is called the Florida Faith Foundation. That's how these episodes have come about. Started as we began to see all the changes that were taking place, the issues that were happening, and that were confronting pastors and churches. We felt like there is definitely a need to have some clarity here for the body of Christ, and also, quite frankly, for us to bring forth a plumb line that says, here's where we stand. We want you to join us. And so with that, we've formed Florida Faith Foundations with the idea of as we stand for the Word of God and what God's Word says in respect to these various issues that we all know what we're facing, that we could unite together, right? And because obviously we can't be united around a lie. We've got to be united around the truth. So right now, let me introduce to you Dr. Vicente Bonilla. He has a Ph.D. in Analytical Chemistry from the University of Oklahoma. He has an MSc from Analytical Chemistry, also from the University of Oklahoma, and a BCS of Chemistry from Bethel College. Dr. Jose Vicente Bonilla started his scientific career at Argonne National Laboratory, where he worked in research projects for the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy. Dr. Bonilla has over 30 years of experience in this industry of research and development on a broad variety of products. He has worked in the development of advanced pharmaceutical products in the genomics area based on synthetic DNA and RNA molecules for the pharmaceutical industry. Personalized medicine or precision medicine. He is the author and co-author of several scientific publications, including 2 reference publications for the plastic industry and the pharmaceutical industry. And with that, we are going to take you to a video and then to our panel and Dr. Jose Bonilla.
Of the central dogma of biology, it's the concept that genetic information stored as DNA gets turned into RNA, a process called transcription, which gets turned into protein. The idea that the flow of information is unidirectional was put forth by Francis Crick in 1958. The very word dogma means that this is the truth, a fact. So can you imagine challenging this established truth? Well, in the 1970s, scientists found an exception to the central dogma. These scientists were studying viruses, and they realized that some viruses, called retroviruses, use RNA and not DNA to store their genetic information. This is different from most other organisms. Why was this interesting to scientists, and how did it lead to their questioning of the central dogma? To answer this, let's first talk about retroviruses. Retroviruses are small particles that consist of genetic information and a few proteins inside a capsule. These viruses need to be inside the cell of another host organism to replicate. Once inside, viruses copy their genetic material to form many more viruses. Scientists knew how DNA was copied to make more DNA. They also knew how DNA was copied to make RNA. But retroviruses posed a puzzle. How can the RNA in these viruses be copied? Back in the early 1970s, David Baltimore and Howard Temin hypothesized that retroviruses might have a special kind of enzyme, a polymerase, that could turn their RNA into DNA. So they went on a search for this enzyme. First, the scientists isolated a candidate enzyme that could use an RNA template and make a product. But what was the product? Was it copies of DNA or of RNA? To answer this question, they combined the purified enzyme with the RNA template and different kinds of nucleotides to be incorporated into the new product. If the nucleotides given were ribonucleotides, the building blocks of RNA, no product was produced. If instead they gave deoxyribonucleotides, the building blocks of DNA, they could get a product. This strongly suggested that the viral polymerase was converting the RNA template into a DNA product and not an RNA product. Information was flowing in the opposite direction that Francis Crick had proposed in the central dogma. This enzyme was later named reverse transcriptase because it does transcription, but backwards. This exciting new discovery earned Baltimore and Temin the Nobel Prize in 1975. Baltimore and Tevin's finding had a major impact on modern medicine and biotechnology. Before the modern genomic era, the identification of most human genes involved copying human RNA into DNA by reverse transcriptase to be used for further studies. Another important example is HIV, the retrovirus that causes AIDS and affects 35 million people worldwide. HIV uses reverse transcriptase to replicate and spread. Thanks to Baltimore and Temin's discovery, physicians now use medicines that block reverse transcriptase to treat patients with HIV. And all of this from questioning the dogma.
Dr. Bonilla, first of all, thank you for coming back tonight. We are all excited that you're here with us, and we really appreciate your time and your love for the Lord and for people, because I know that's what is motivating you in coming out and sharing. Well, the video we just saw was pretty powerful in light of some of the questions that have been brought up in the public and frankly here last week. So my first question to you is that since the central dogma was that reverse transcription is not possible, the RNA cannot return back to the nucleus and interact with the DNA, in light of what we've just seen, could you comment on that? Because that is a huge cornerstone issue right now in the argument.
One of the problems is, remember 1953, special year. That's when I was born. And that was also the year that the structure of DNA was discovered by two scientists, one from Chicago in the US and one from England. And that's why the structure is called Watson-Crick. For those of you that study any type of science, you normally run into that name. Watson-Crick, that's the structure for the DNA. At the time that it was discovered, these two scientists determined and said to the whole wide world that this was a one-way process, that the information came in from the DNA into the messenger RNA, and the RNA would produce the protein or any other compound that the human body would need. That's how it works. And that was called the central dogma. People remember that. But as you saw in this short video, actually it was discovered that that's not true all the time. That there are instances on which the RNA can go back and reincorporate, and that step is called reverse transcription. And that is what I mentioned last week, that the injected mRNA could end up in the DNA, altering in that way, editing in that way the human DNA. That was discovered in 1970. But people remember, and this is kind of a natural thing, so people remember the first message. The central dogma was remembered. And when the new information came in, not too many people realized, we need to change our paradigm.
All right, so let me follow up on that, because some people are following and some people are not. This is the second time I have seen this video. All right, so the COVID vaccines that you were telling us to call them gene therapy, not vaccines. We learned that last week, okay? So this gene therapy vaccines, your concern is that the premise that these are safe is based on the idea that reverse transcription does not happen. Is that correct?
That is what a lot of scientists, well, I shouldn't say scientists, a lot of people say.
All right, so let's make sure we're tracking with you and we get this right. If reverse transcription happens, and in 1975, what's his name, Baltimore?
Baltimore. Mm-hmm.
Baltimore proved that reverse transcription happens, and it's not an obscure thing. Basically, he got a Nobel Peace Prize. He got a Nobel Peace Prize for proving that reverse transcription happens, right?
A Nobel science. It was actually in medicine, the prize for.
So
there
it
are
wasn't a
several.
Peace Prize, a Nobel Science Prize.
Science
basically.
Prize, yeah.
All right, so I just want to make it clear. This is not obscure research or data put together by right-wing Trump supporters.
It's a well-known
No, I'm just
fact.
serious. This is 1975. These scientists discovered that reverse transcription happens, and it was awarded. Now, let me follow up again, because I want to. So, what does that mean? What is that? Why is that a danger with these gene therapy shots we're getting? Why is that a danger? Why is reverse transcription dangerous? Make it crystal clear for everybody, please.
If the mRNA that is being injected into human body, if it incorporates into the DNA in the nucleus, that's going to express. And as I was saying last week, it will probably be the next generations. So it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time to genetically express. One of the things that I said in other instances in dealing with dangerous chemicals is that one of the injustices of the chemicals is that they don't kill you, they normally don't kill you instantly. They just take time to do that. And I normally add, it takes human beings through a long journey of pain and suffering. So that is a terrible thing, but that's what we are dealing with.
So I'm sorry, I just want to pin this down because for me, guys, this is like one of the big things that we're learning from him. Let me just review. Reverse transcription has been proven that it happens because I left last week with uncertainty that we had the factual evidence that reverse transcription happens. Between last week and this week, we have absolutely ridiculous proof. And not only that, the HIV medications were based on the fact of the knowledge that we learned of reverse transcription. Medications for people with HIV was built on the idea of reverse transcription, right, doctor?
Yes.
All right, so now with great certainty, we know that it happens. All right, you said, what was the word you said? You said it takes a while for it to manifest or to express.
To express it.
How? Give us an example of how that RNA, changing the DNA, might express itself.
Well, anything, all the whole human being is expressed from the DNA. As we know, the DNA is transferred into the newborn baby, is expressed, the DNA of the mother and the DNA of the father is combined. We know that. And so the problem is if there are defects already in the contributing DNA from either the father or the mother, that's going to show up, as I mentioned last week, either on a faulty organ, on a defect. We are experiencing a lot of that. The problem is that that doesn't come to the media. The media doesn't report those, but we are experiencing, even now, even before the vaccine, we are experiencing a lot of newborn problems that never seen before. And if this is going to happen, it's going to be a tragic process.
That's go ahead.
Dr. Bonilla, again, before we move on from this point, if this discovery was made 1975, quite a few years ago, surely any scientist that's involved in DNA, RNA research, and I would imagine most medical professionals should be aware that reverse transcription is possible and it's been proven. Why then are we hearing almost militant affirmations that once the RNA leaves, and medical professionals, I've heard medical professionals affirming and making a statement, once the RNA leaves, it does its thing quickly, then it dies and it's flushed out of the system. There cannot be a reverse process where it re-enters. Why is that discovery from 1975 and any subsequent ones, why is it being ignored?
My guess is that a lot of people in the medical field have been told that this is exactly the case, but we need to realize that in the scientific community, we have kind of a joke. In God we trust, scientists must bring data to the table. In God we trust, but if you want to argue something, you need to bring data to support your position. And that's probably something that all of us should ask is, don't just make claims, you need to have the data to support it. And it's very hard to do on this, simply because it's new. We are not talking about 50 years down the line where you can have the data. We are talking about now, up front, in the first year or two of this molecule. But be aware that people will tell you out there that they were told that this mRNA is designed, because it's man-made, is designed not to penetrate the nucleus and to recombine with the existing, with the human DNA. You'll be told that, and the answer is, we don't have the data. We don't know. Why? Because it's new. So once the human DNA has been changed, it's going to express down the line in the next several years. And that's really the sad reality, but it is what it is.
Isn't this the big concern? The question is to vaccinate or not to vaccinate. We did that as a tagline to draw interest. It seemed to work. We had a lot of people watch online. We had the largest number of people watching our website. But anyhow, the real point is you're really concerned about the long-term danger here. That's what I hear you saying. That's what we've heard from you from the beginning, Doctor. You're a Christian man, a knowledgeable, experienced scientist, and you're genuinely concerned about people, this RNA reintroducing itself to the DNA and changing the DNA that will cause serious problems down the road.
We must learn from history. We must learn from our mistakes. And we are reaping so much sickness and death from mistakes that we have made in the past with all kinds of chemicals that we put mostly in the environment, and we end up with a lot of animals, a lot of people dying and sick. And at the time, the crazy thing is that at the time, we were told that they were safe. It is absolutely incredible how we swallow that kind of stuff, because, again, the injustice of chemicals is that they don't kill you instantly. Most of them don't kill you instantly. They accumulate in your body and they express over time. And that's really sad. And we as human beings cannot swallow that. We have to think it through. And we have to learn from history. That is just reasonable.
How many use Roundup? We were all using Roundup like crazy, and now Roundup is like supposedly one of the worst things. Sure. Perfect example. And yes. Not to, let me just say, I'm going to say this. I take full responsibility. I don't represent Nick. I don't represent Daniel. I don't represent Dr. Bonilla. I feel like we have got to be strong and courageous and take as many people with us to not get this gene therapy, period. Period. I stand unequivocally. I don't care if I have to stand alone. And for this current president to say today that I question your intelligence, wow, I have so many snarky comments about that man, but I'm not going to make it. So I'm thankful for the humility and meekness of Dr. Bonilla. Should we move on to the next question?
Sure. It really kind of follows along the theme. Dr. Bonilla, considering the force with which the COVID vaccines are being presented to the public, do you think there is a specific reason being applied to the presentation of these vaccines to the public? Do you believe there's a particular conditioning that's going on that's hopeful behind the pressure of the vaccines being presented, that RNA research for the future down the road will be accepted, and that this is the big rollout and it can't fail?
I think it is. If we go back to Genesis 11, when the people were building the Tower of Babel, and God comes down and looks at what's going on, and he says, now there is nothing impossible to these people, so we have to intervene. And we are at the threshold, we are at the portal today. I mentioned to you that the 7 most developed countries with the top scientists from 7 different countries enter into this human genome project. It is unthinkable, even for me as a scientist. It is just unthinkable, the amount of knowledge that is out there. It's just extraordinary. And so we are at that point. In the material part, we are at that point. We have accumulated a tremendous, tremendous amount of knowledge. And there is no limit to what we can do now. There is absolutely no limit. You can create whatever you want to create in the human kingdom, in the animal kingdom, or agricultural or plant, whatever. We have the knowledge and the tools to do it. And let me take you one step back. When I was a freshman in Colombia, a physics professor from Sweden that was teaching in Colombia, he says, and we are talking about 47 years ago, he says to his students, he says, I want to warn you that a lot of knowledge is coming our way. I mean, we're talking about 46, 47 years ago. But we do not have the wisdom or the insight to manage it. And we are at that point today. The great volume of knowledge is just overwhelming. And there is no limit. Just like we happened in Genesis 11, at this point, everything is possible. And so I want to take in the context, and I'll come back to that point, is that we have grown so much in the physical and material realm. But I personally, as a spiritual being, I'm looking forward to the growth in the spiritual way. Because we have actually, if you look around the media and if you look around our planet, we have actually decreased. We have actually walked away from the spiritual values. But that's going to change. Yeah. That is going to change. Yeah. Because when we see the secrets of the marvelous creation, we are going to realize that there is a creator and there was a higher purpose for each one of us, each one of you. It is the best, the most exciting area that I can assure you is going to happen in the next few years. That I'm absolutely certain that is going to happen. The spiritual growth, the spiritual awakening.
I love his positivity. I need you to pray for me on that one, because I'm very serious. I'm really concerned. Don't you love his spirit and just the meekness, humility, and everything? It's that's good. Yeah, you go ahead, brother.
You know, you mentioned the Swedish scientist who was your professor at the time, and his prognostication that we have a world of knowledge about to drop on us. We are not morally prepared to be stewards of it, to handle it. That leads right into this next question. This entire third segment, when we put this together, we wanted to talk around the subject of the intersection between pharma and big corporate money and government, and the impact as those three entities. Naturally, we understand the need for them to cooperate together, but cooperation versus sometimes well, what that Swedish professor warned about, I think we're seeing today. So my question to you, having said that, do you see a negative impact upon this immediate COVID-19 research and any residual research as we get these various variants and this continues on down the road? Do you see a negative impact upon this process of research through the involvement of big corporate money and government? And if so, could you specifically explain where you see we could be mismanaging the knowledge?
One of the things that is sad to observe is that what the forefathers of this country envisioned has been inverted, has been reversed. We know that the government and the power is by the people, for the people. But that one has been reversed. A simple example is NASA. NASA used to be run by the government, and it's just an example because there is a whole bunch, maybe 90% of what used to be the people now is the corporations with heavy-handed interest in monetary returns. And so that is a major problem because, as you can see with NASA, it's now privately operated. The space program is essentially privately operated. The universities, where you could find a lot of people that didn't like to be obedient to the desire of the corporations. A lot of scientists wanted to be in the academic area where there was a lot of freedom. The corporations are taking over the interest of research in universities. So it has been reversed. And it is sad to see, but that's the situation now. One of the things that I think the purpose of your question is through this human genome project that I've been talking about, the discovery of the human genetic map. It was essentially a lot of corporations came in to sponsor the research and to patent a lot of genetic information, so that if there is anything that needs to be done for medical reasons, they have the patent and you are going to pay for it. So there is a lot of money involved in it, which is sad and unfortunate, but that's the way it is.
Let me jump in here and say this. Some people might be listening saying, okay, Dr. Bonilla is a scientist. What does he know about the intersection of big government, big pharma? Well, just to remind you from his resume, he worked in research projects for the Department of Defense. He worked for the Department of Energy and the Environmental Protection Agency. So he had a front row seat of the convergence of science with government. So I think that's important because if I don't know the back door of this, I'm thinking, okay, what does he know? I'm not really listening to him on that. No, can you just give us some specific examples of what you saw while you were at the Environmental Protection Agency, Department of Energy, or the Department of Defense that illustrates that? Because I think I know I'm a very critical thinker. I'm tuning him out like, well, he's just a scientist. He really doesn't know about that. I don't even know why they're asking him that. That's what I'm thinking. If I wasn't on the inside of this, so can you give us an illustration of maybe a bad thing that happened in one of those agencies where you saw those entities interacting not well for the betterment of people?
There is always, I guess, any of you read or heard of a book called Silent Spring?
Silent Spring?
Silent Spring. That was, I think that book came out. It was published by a scientist that noticed something, and the reason for the title, that noticed something interesting, and is the use of insecticides, the heavy use of insecticides. All of a sudden, she woke up in the forest, or was in the forest, and the birds were not around. That's why the singing of the birds disappeared all of a sudden. And she discovered, she was a scientist, she was a biologist, I believe. And right now I don't remember her name, but anyhow, she wrote and she appealed specifically to the agencies in charge of controlling or regulating the use of insecticides, and she was really demonized by the corporations producing the product, specifically DDT. If you never heard of the Silent Spring publication, you probably never heard of DDT. But that was from her work that was taking off the market, and because it was doing severe damage to our planet by affecting the delicate balance of our beautiful creation, just by killing the mosquitoes and other creatures like that. It affected the chain. It affected the birds, and I'm sure other animals, other beautiful creatures created by our Father were affected. So we have to, that's where the wisdom comes in.
As a boy, I used to run behind the DDT trucks when they were spraying the neighborhood. So you'd see my little feet shuffling in the crowd until Mom and Dad grilling in the backyard would say, "Boys, come to get dinner." "Oh, look, Don, they're playing in the cloud." So we
It's
didn't
true.
know. That's a true
It
story.
was in my neighborhood too.
Yeah, that's a true story. I spent a lot of time in that cloud. And the personal testimonial is that I should have been a scientist, and now I am a preacher as a result of spending too much time in that cloud. You have to
Right.
take
Hey man, what are you saying about us, bro?
take
I
your
don't
work
like the way-
take your work where you can find it, I guess. So, I'd like to go back to a comment you made in answering that question when you used the word patents. And you said that Human Genome Project, which really was the glorious, what was that, a 12-year process?
Over 12 years, and that was the completion, but even after that, there has continued to be a lot of research, specifically looking at specific genes that are responsible for certain behavior or characteristics of the human being, specifically looking in the medicinal or medical applications, but many other things.
So apparently onlookers from the balcony of corporations and government are looking at the tremendous breakthroughs that took place, this powerful information. I know you said it, and almost kind of, I'm asking you to kind of back up and say it again, that corporations, companies came in and patented pieces of that information,
DNA, yep.
those discoveries. How do you patent the work of God? I mean, so does that mean that by taking out a patent, they now control how that piece of information is used
Absolutely.
down the road in the development of medicines or whatever
Yes.
applications?
Yeah, and that's a sad story, because Watson, you remember Watson Crick? Two scientists. Watson is the scientist from the US, and he was in charge of the Human Genome Project for about half of the time that it took. And when he noticed that a lot of corporations were patenting the information coming out of the project, he said, "We cannot do that. You cannot patent the work of nature." And I guess I would have said the work of God. But anyhow, his position was overlooked, and corporations continued to patent this information. And as a result, he resigned his position. And Collins, Dr. Francis Collins, who is now the National Institute of Health director, he took over. But anyhow, he was demonized for coming against corporations, patenting the scientific knowledge that was coming out, churning out of this magnificent project. So money really is really a sad story, because I feel bad for the poor scientist, because he was and has been demonized.
I guess as citizens, we just naturally put so much unquestioned trust
Yeah.
in the authority of government and the power of corporations. It's a little unsettling.
Yep.
So that we have time for questions, we have one more question for you in this segment that we want to give you plenty of time to respond to. And I think this question brings it right down to the news cycle of the day, and here it is. Do you believe, Dr. Bonilla, that people should have the right not to take these vaccines if they so choose? And why should they have that right in the face of the, quote, pandemic?
Absolutely. I think we go back. I'm going to use two stories from Nazi Germany, but this is one of them. In the 40s, during the Second World War, a lot of people, not only Jews, but a lot of people were used as experimental rabbits to do experiments with chemicals on if we use this chemical, what's going to happen? Is it going to improve? Is it going to diminish? Whatever. It was a terrible thing. And remember, we must communicate this to our leaders. It was the U.S. That came in and said, this is wrong. To use human beings as rats or experimental animals is not right, it's not human. And that is what was called the Nuremberg Accord, it's an international treaty that we all agree that was wrong. And that was headed by the U.S. It was the U.S. that called for that trial and against doctors and other people in the medical area experimenting with human beings. And that's what we are doing today. We cannot swallow that easily. At least we need to ask questions. At least we need to be well informed so that we can make the right decisions. And by the way, talking about right decisions, one of the things that I love about this country, when I came to this country 45 years ago, is that the freedom to choose. Freedom is such a wonderful thing, or was such a wonderful thing, an opportunity. And beyond that was the ability to disagree and still live in peace with each other, still honor each other. That was a wonderful thing that I observed 45 years ago when I came to this country. It was amazing how people can disagree and still honor each other and live with each other. So what I want to summarize here is, it really doesn't matter what your choice is. I will honor you, I will respect your choice, and that is the principle that operated in this country for such a long time. And we should be able to bring that back to the country. We should be able to. You are free to choose, I am free to choose. But we will inform. That is the whole purpose of my coming here, is to provide information so that you can make informed decisions. And at the end of the day, I'm going to be with you regardless of your choice. I'm going to be your friend, I'm going to respect you, and I'm going to honor you, regardless of what your choice is.
That's good. Let's give him a hand for that one. Before Daniel comes, I just want to reiterate what he just said, because I think it's really important. My role is really the clarifier. And so to clarify what you said, you feel like that people need to have the choice to say no to these vaccines, mainly because the vaccines and this gene therapy is too experimental.
That would be my summary.
That's really important. You're saying this scientist has significant research with RNA and DNA, just proved to us tonight that reverse transcription happens, that mRNA can reinteract, change our DNA, that can be passed on to our children, people that are younger, and that's too big of an experiment, and we should have the freedom to say no. Unfortunately, the climate that we're in, the intensity of the voices of those decrying us in this room who've not getting the vaccine, who have not planned on getting the vaccine, it's being ramped up. And you as a Colombian that came to this country, what you admired about this country is seemed to be gone away, that we could disagree and we would be civil. We've lost civility on this issue. And I think, folks, that's my personal number one big issue. We've lost, there's this idea that they're right and we're wrong, and now we're going to put the squeeze to you. You're going to have to, you work for the VA, you got to get the shot. You know, if you work for this company, you got to get the shot. This is immoral. This is not right, because the scientist with the facts is saying it's too experimental. Let's give him a big hand for bringing us clarity tonight. I think that's really good.
Thomas Macri. If you have the reverse transcription, the RNA goes and changes the DNA, and then the DNA, then in the course of time, you have the messenger RNA, then which then comes to the DNA and goes into the ribosomes. How long does that take? Do we know which specific loci, which gene is affected most, since I guess these first two vaccines are about the same? And also, the second part of that is the Johnson & Johnson is a few COVID spikes added to a adenovirus. Do you think that's a different type of vaccine, more traditional vaccine than the Pfizer or the Moderna?
Yes. The Pfizer and Moderna are specifically synthetic, man-made RNA. The Johnson & Johnson is a natural occurring. I'm not endorsing that one, but I'm just establishing the difference.
Do you think that's safer?
It's hard to tell, because for what I have heard, there have been a lot of instances on which short-term is actually doing significant amount of damage.
Okay.
For me, one victim of the vaccine is too many.
Okay.
Let me add to that, because we should be able to minimize or eliminate casualties from the vaccine. We spoke about personalized medicine. We should be able to test. If you come to make a choice between the two, we should be able to test your genome and say, you are at risk, you shouldn't take it, because if you do, in a few days you're going to develop this kind of thing. We have the capability to do that, and that is something that we should be able to use to save human lives, to determine who is at risk and who is not by the genetic map.
So in the course of time, and in the human body, as cells are replaced through mitosis, and you have apoptosis, which then, the normal cell death. So does the DNA change eventually through all the cells in the body? And would it not affect sperm cells more than eggs, because the eggs are already formed when the baby is born, but the sperm cells are created new in the guy? Would it not affect the sperm cells more than the eggs?
The DNA is not going to change. It's going to continuously renew itself, so that whether you are a 15-year-old or a 60-year-old, your DNA remains the same, and you'll be able to pass it on to next generations.
Hi, Doctor.
Yeah.
There was a thing that was, the FDA announced that the CDC PCR test for COVID-19 has been fully revoked. The emergency use authorization has been revoked. What is the normal years that the FDA can safely approve any kind of a drug or a vaccine? It used to be 5 or 10 years.
I'm going to give you a very brief answer, and hopefully in the next session we'll be able to elaborate a little more. But there is a requirement by the FDA that a product is safe and effective. In the case of genetic material, to answer your question, I don't know how many years you have to test that is indeed safe, but it's definitely longer, because I was involved in in synthetic DNA and RNA introduction to the market. And I know that it took several years specifically for that, because you have to test over long term if it is safe and effective.
Hi, my name is Kathy, and I'm going to be talking with my doctor about whether to take the vaccine, and I'm sure she's going to insist that I do. And if she does, I'm going to say I'm pro-choice, and it's my body, in case she's the other side.
That's good.
But
Yeah.
is it not? Has it not been approved by the FDA because it hasn't gone through animal testing? Is that part of the protocol?
I think right now the FDA is getting a lot of pressure to approve it because he has not been approved. A lot of people say that it's approved by the FDA. It's not. And so it is an up to this point, it's an experimental molecule approved for emergency use. But
So-
it's not approved as a
So
for-
we're the animals.
yes.
They really are, and that's a good question.
Hi, my name is Jeannie, and I want to thank you for coming here and giving us all your knowledge. I wanted to know if you have the, if you've been tested and you have the antibody, how long does that antibody last in you? Because I have two different doctors, and they're both telling me, oh, you need to get the shot, but my antibody was 1,400, which is very high. And so how long does that antibody stay in your system?
I don't know in terms of weeks or months or years, but I can tell you this, it's going to differ depending on the person and depending on how good, how strong your immune system is. And I wanted to add, before I forget, to the previous question, is that there are alternatives. People don't, or I should say the government and agencies might not want to hear about alternatives, but there are alternatives. A lot of people have survived with alternative approach, and we can, in other occasions, we can go over those, but there are
I'd
definitely
like that.
different choices.
Thank you very much.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much for your time and coming out. My question is, could the possibility of what we're seeing now with children, when I was a child, I was vaccinated like 6 times, and now they've up to 72 for children. Could this be what we're seeing as far as ADHD and autism and so on and so forth? Could this be the result of all these vaccines?
I know that there is a discussion and disagreements and all kinds of stuff out there, but for me as a scientist, as a spiritual person, the answer is yes. Of course, as we know, even with the virus, there are the 2 or 3 teams, pro and against. And really is an area that I can tell you my opinion, but there are a lot of people out there that will be on 2 different camps in terms of vaccines and the benefit versus the dangers of it.
I know that they're pushing a lot for the 5G and everything, and I have heard that the 5G affects the oxygen molecule, and that effect makes it hard for the hemoglobin in the blood to absorb it. And one of the first places for the rollout of the 5G was in Wuhan and Italy and cruise ships. Do you think that there might be a correlation between the 5G and what we saw with people falling face down in the cement in Wuhan?
It is possible. And again, there are a lot of factors there. I know people that get sick coming next to the antennas. I have seen it, and I know that happens. But not everyone, and that's really the reason why I'm advocating for a strong immune system, a strong protection. because the people that are the most vulnerable are the ones with a immune system that is not up to par.
Hello, my name is Marnie, and I heard the other day that the FDA was going to be taking off the emergency and they're going to be approving this in January. So I'm wondering, what is our argument now? Because I can't just say it's experimental.
You still have a choice, and that's really what you have before you, that you have a choice to take either the vaccine or an alternative. And so, for example, a simple example is aspirin is approved by the FDA. That doesn't mean that you have to take aspirin because there are many other factors involved in the process. You might be allergic, you might have a stomach ulcer. There is a whole bunch of other factors that play into that. The fact that is FDA approved doesn't make it automatically you have to take it. It is again, is unreasonable.
Good point. Yeah, because my family's all got it and they're looking at me like, next? And I'm like, no. So
Yeah.
any argument I can take on my side.
What I encourage people is to consider alternatives. There are a lot of alternatives out there.